I paused the playlists yesterday to do some other stuff. I will likely be doing that every few days here and there as I come up with other stuff to keep us all occupied while is going on outside. And keeping your mind occupied is important. They've come out over the last few days, and the World Health Organization said about a year ago, oh, video game addiction is really bad. Now they're going, don't go outside, stay home, play video games. It's a good idea. So distractions are good. So that's what all this content that I'm producing now is for. Is and the fact that it's evergreen means people looking back at this video 2 years from now can say well, Florida won the Stanley Cup, so I don't know what you're talking about, and B, can look back and go, hey, we survived that. So Florida Panthers all-time best. This is where things get kind of dicey. The Florida Panthers right now are trying to build a winning organization, and it's an attempt they've been making from day one. It is an attempt that has been mostly a failure. And yet, what do we talk about with Florida? Well, fans don't go watch Florida games. Well, of course not. Let's go through this. Their best all-time in points is Jonathan Huberdeau at 437. I love Huberdeau. I think he's a great player. 437 points should not be your all-time leading scorer when you've been in the league for 25 years. Goals leader is Olli Jokinen with 188. And Jokinen was great for them. Shouldn't be their all-time leading goal scorer with 188. Assist leader is Huberdeau with 289. Now, the reason for this is simple. Florida's had a hard time putting together great teams. They haven't had a lot of guys who stuck around for a really long time. They've had issues with some of their drafting. Sometimes it's their trading that's been the problem. There's been a real issue with finding a consistent build. A consistent build to something better. And they're one of those teams that I use as a cautionary tale when people talk about just tear it down and do a rebuild. These guys have been stuck in a rebuild for a very long time, and they've been on the verge of some really good results and not quite capable of getting there. Penalty minutes leader, Paul Laws, 1,702. He was a tough one. I will say Laws was a tough one. Worrell was a tough one for them as well. They haven't had a problem getting enforcers in Florida. Really hasn't been a problem. Power play goals, Scott Mellenby with 66 is the all-time leader in power play goals. Now, with other teams, when I've got into their all-time greatest, there's been a huge debate. Honestly, at forward, it's between Huberdeau and Barkov. You can argue Stephen Weiss was their best forward at times. Nathan Horton had some good years, and Pavel Bure, of course. By the time he goes to the Rangers, he's basically done. When he came over to Florida from Vancouver, he was very happy to get out of Vancouver. It was an uncomfortable relationship between the Canucks and Bure. And Pavel, honestly, was fantastic for them. But, again, by the time he left, it was obvious he was somewhat damaged goods. And, if not for that, he would definitely be their all-time goals leader. So, that's one of those ones. And, of course, Valeri Bure was there for a while as well. They both played together, which made me feel bad as a Canuck fan because I had wanted the Canucks to draft Valeri, and maybe if they drafted Valeri and could have mended fences with Pavel, but hey, a lot of maybes in there, right? Now, when you get into the conversation of their all-time best player, it is hard to argue against Roberto Luongo. 230 wins, he's their leader. Shots against, 17,501. Shutouts, Luongo with 38. So he's the leader there. Save percentage, Vaucoon comes in with a 923 save percentage. Vaucoon's one of those forgotten ones. They've had pretty good goaltending all the way through. The Panthers really haven't had problems in net. And it starts with their expansion draft and with Van Beesbroek. Van Beesbroek was excellent for them and then ends up leaving. I believe he went to the Flyers from there. And he was a very good goaltender for them. They had Fitzpatrick as well as the backup. That was a really solid tandem for an expansion team. And Jose Theodore. Theodore had a couple of very good seasons for Florida as well. Goaltending really, for the most part, hasn't been an issue until very recently, where Luongo's wearing down and his time's running out. Reimer didn't have a very good season last year, so they say, all right, we're going to go with Bobrovsky. We're going to clear everything out. It was pretty obvious last winter that they were talking about, we're going to go, The rumor was Florida was going to free up some money for Bobrovsky, and they did. And they wanted Panarin as well. They didn't get Panarin, but they got Bobrovsky. So maybe a few years from now when we're talking about their all-time greatest goaltender, Bobrovsky's in there. But so far this season, that hasn't been the case. So for a franchise that's been known for having pretty good goaltending and having trouble scoring, right now they're a team that's scoring a lot and having trouble with their goaltending. So That's the interesting thing with Florida, because we're getting into the all-time greats. For them to have a great team that people could say, yeah, you know what, that Florida Panthers team is really good, you kind of need to have the goaltending and the offense at the same time. And this team hasn't had that. For instance, 95-96, they're Stanley Cup finalists. They got swept by the Colorado Avalanche. They were a team of underdogs. It was a team of blue-collar guys. Lines 1 through 4 looked pretty darn similar. They trapped well. They were entertaining, though. So this was at a time where there was a lot of trapping hockey going on. But they still played an entertaining game. But definitely the neutral zone trap helped them get to where they got, and hard work. That was one really hard-working team. And then they met the Avalanche, who made it clear pretty quick, you're not quite in our category. And that got them swept aside. But that is their best season. And that was 96. That's 24 years ago. That's their best season. And what makes it worse is that was their first playoff appearance, and they haven't won a round since. So, again, when you're talking about attendance, this is stuff that people in Florida have to be thinking about. Like, well, this team hasn't been good for a long time. I got other places to put my money. Most wins versus any one franchise, the Tampa Bay Lightning, 66. They actually have a very good record against the Tampa Bay Lightning overall. Points percentage, Nashville, 594 save percentage, Points percentage against Nashville. If they had a 594 save percentage against Nashville, we wouldn't be talking about Nashville as one of their best. Goals for Tampa Bay. They've scored 422 career goals against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And, of course, we'd all like to see Florida against Tampa Bay in the playoffs. That would be fantastic. We'd like to see Florida in the playoffs. That would be fantastic as well. Now, goals for per game against Vegas. They have an average of 3.17, but they've only played Vegas 6 times. So Tampa Bay, they've got a 3.06 goals per game record against them. So pretty good, because goals against per game, their best is Nashville, 2.47. So they like playing Nashville. They're not in the same conference. They don't play often, but still, overall, since they came into the league, they've done pretty well against the Nashville Predators. When we get into notable captains, of course, Barkov being notable right now. Jovanovski, he started off with Florida Panthers, gets traded to Vancouver as part of the Bure deal, ends up coming back towards the end of his career. Olli Jokinen, Scott Mellanby. Mellanby, of course, was one of those hard workers during that 96 run, and Brian Skrudland, who was their first captain, and he was the epitome of that hard-working forward for the Florida Panthers. And, of course, they had Stu Barnes and a bunch of really hard-working defensive forwards, just they didn't quite have the offense to match up against a Colorado Avalanche team. And most points in the season, 2015-2016, they had 103. Met the Islanders in the first round and lost that one. And I thought they had a chance that year. I thought, you know what? Florida's finally going to win a round. And no, it's not happening. That's too bad. Longest playoff streak is 2. 1996, they go to the finals. 1997, they went out in the first round. 1998, they missed the playoffs. The most consecutive appearances in the playoffs is 2. And the second was in 1997. So we can have the discussion on how Florida does or doesn't support the team, but it is worthy of note. There hasn't been success. Success is important eventually. And so for Florida, this is one of the reasons that I've over the last few years kind of picked them up and said, yeah, this is a team I want to see do well. I'm really cheering for Florida because I feel bad for them at this stage. And there are fans out there for Florida. They may not have as many as Toronto, clearly, but there are fans out there for Florida. And I feel for those fans that do pay for the tickets and they do sit there and they cheer as loud as they can. But for many of the rest of us, we sort of say, well, yeah, but, and you point out the empty seats. The empty seats, it makes sense when you haven't had any plan. And that's the thing when you're looking at Florida's history, is a consistent plan. They seem to be getting there now. They seem to have something in mind. And it may very well work, but it's going to hinge on that Bobrovsky contract not looking like a huge weight on the team going forward. Best coach, I went with Gerard Gallant. I could have gone with McLean, and it was between McLean and Gallant, and you can make the argument for McLean because of the 96 finals. I went with Gallant because he managed to get this team to 103 points. I still don't know how, but he did, and the team hasn't been the same since he left, even though they now have Quenneville. So the next time I do this, if they make the playoffs and they make a bit of a run out of it, Quenneville's going to end up being likely their best coach. But for right now, I can't see going against Gallant. Best GM was tough too. I could have gone with Brian Murray, but I had to go with Dale Talon. Dale Talon, I think, has had the right idea in mind, and as long as ownership isn't interfering with him and they let him, see this through, I think he's got a real plan. Bobrovsky didn't have a great season this year. I don't put that on Talon. I do think it was a bit much that they gave Bobrovsky, but they kind of painted themselves into a corner there, and you can blame Talon for that. But again, if Bobrovsky plays like he did last year in the playoffs for Columbus at any point for Florida, all that criticism probably falls away. He was a Panther, Bertuzzi. Bertuzzi was traded to Florida, played a grand total of 7 games that year, got injured, and then he was gone. So he did not last very long as a Panther, at least on the ice. He was a member of the roster for a while, but it's easy to forget that Bertuzzi went to Florida. And another one of these trades that was kind of sort of won by the Vancouver Canucks. Esa Tikkanen, yeah, he was a Florida Panther. Igor Larionov, absolutely. Notice, these were pretty big names. Alexei Kovalov, yep. Now, in some cases, these guys are there at the end of their careers, and that's something that has been an issue for Florida as well. Dino Ciccarelli, end of the career. Mike Vernon, see, this is a pattern. Ed Belfour, but people will point out, and rightfully so, people go to Florida to retire. So that's, I guess, what was going on with players here. Ed Belfour, Sanders Ozolinch, Joe Nieuwendyk. So a lot of guys there that are pretty well known, some Hall of Famers sprinkled in there, but they didn't play in Florida when they were at their peak, when they were at their best. And that's been a problem for the Florida Panthers. So they have Barkov, they have Huberdeau, they have Dadonov at this stage on that line as well. They have some really good players, Achari with 20 goals thus far in the season that's on pause. But for Florida, it's a matter of building consistent success. This 2 seasons being the record from 96-97 as the longest that they've been in the playoffs consecutively, that is, I think, a big part of the reason why you don't see the fan support, why you don't see the enthusiasm, and it does get difficult. Last year was a very difficult year in that Florida looked like they had everything they needed to move up, and they didn't. This year, again, it looked like they had everything they needed to move up, and they didn't. They find a way to fail. And it is understandable that people don't say, hey, I want to plunk down $150 to watch these guys because their jerseys are nice. So, that's the problem. But that is the best of the Florida Panthers. Of course, this means that LA is up next. LA, of course, a little bit more success in recent years than Florida. But LA would totally identify with how Florida is feeling at this stage. I'd say up until Gretzky got there. And then after Gretzky left, they went through that long dry period as well. For Florida, it's just have a plan. And right now it looks like they do. So I would imagine that this playoff streak eventually becomes something other than 2. At the very least, they tie it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Do stay safe out there. Stay sane. Stay sane in the middle of all this. Do your best not to over-consume information that's going to make you want to panic and freak out. And again, we'll get through this. We'll get through this together as a community and as a globe. So anywhere you are on the planet, yeah, we're all in this together. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will always be here. And I trust that you will always be tuning in as well. Thank you guys so much again. I will talk to you very soon.